Well, here we go again. The coaching carousel at Morgantown seems to never stop. It only pauses briefly for a few seconds before it starts back up again. And poor Ren Baker is on another coaching search. It is search season. As Curry Hicks Sage on Twitter would say, it is search season, ladies and gentlemen, from West Virginia. Once again, and here on episode number, I think it's episode 29 of the Golden Blue Breakdown Show, Jonathan and I are going to talk about that. Jonathan, how's it going, man?
You know, Couz, when we started this show together, we knew there would be a lot to talk about: football, basketball, you name it. But boy, has it been a roller coaster.
Yep.
And this could quite go down in terms of hoops anyway. Maybe the craziest 11 months, but an even crazier week. I think we got a lot to talk about.
Yep. Absolutely. Let's dive right in. Before we do, though, I do actually before we do, I got to give a shout out to my sponsor here, Couz, Stone Street and Buckner Attorneys at Law. So let's go ahead and do that real quick, and we'll be right back. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. All right. Thank you for being patient, letting us get through the housekeeping, and thanks to Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner for supporting the show. Jonathan, let's just go ahead and dive in, man. What are your thoughts on DeVries out to Indiana? You need a new coach now again.
Yeah.
So who's coming in? Who's on your mind as some top candidates? Just roll, man. I'll let you say whatever's on your mind.
Yeah, so I guess my first thought, and I'll try and do I've got a lot of thoughts, and so I'll try and do a timeline of events, which could be scary, a timeline of events in my mind. But I'll just kind of go all the way back to Selection Sunday. First, I thought it was a little bit strange that, to my knowledge, West Virginia didn't host a watch party, didn't have a lot of people together. Maybe it could have been because a lot of people felt like they were in. But I thought as a team, that's a night you generally get together and celebrate. Now, I could have missed something, but to my knowledge, that didn't occur. So I thought that was a little strange. Then let's go to about 7 o'clock on Sunday evening, Selection Sunday. And it became obvious, I think, about that time that West Virginia had missed the tournament. Mm-hmm. I even posted on Twitter whenever Darian DeVries had well, first off, you went a little bit of time without hearing anything from West Virginia, and I thought, guys, we got to put something out. Mm-hmm. And then believe Ren Baker was the first one, mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, I get it, but that's a little bit off. I thought we would have heard from DeVries, and then he put out a statement with Ren Baker, his second. And I took a little bit of heat when I posted his statement, and I just thought it was weak. Man, I was expecting somebody to be in the trenches with these guys for the last 11 months, mm-hmm. fighting through everything they've fought for, to essentially, in my thought, and I think yours as well, and even the teams got robbed of an NCAA tournament selection. For somebody that shows a lot of fire, a lot of passion, a lot of energy, it just fell flat to me. And so it screams something's not right. And then if we just fast forward to the Iowa rumors ramping up, and then we slowly started to get to the Indiana rumors. So on one hand, I was a little bit confused, and I don't want to say confused, but I was probably more caught off guard, because I wasn't caught off guard because the timeline of events seemed off to me. I felt like we would have heard more, we would have seen more, and we didn't. That was strange. Because I got to admit, I was a little bit taken aback because if we'll go back 11 months or so to DeVries' introduction at West Virginia, he talked about, I don't jump job to job. I don't just leave. I've stayed at this place for X years, this place at X years. He talked about how he wouldn't just leave Drake for any job. It was West Virginia. It was the community. It was Ren Baker. It was the surroundings. And so, really, I don't think anybody anticipated a one and done. And so, on one hand, if I can be shocked, and on the other hand, I'm not. But here we are. Yeah, I mean, an introduction from you that I didn't have it on the bingo card that we would be already looking for another head men's basketball coach at West Virginia. And I do not envy the job Ren Baker has. And if there's any faith that we can have to get through this, it's that he's heading the search, and I trust him. And he made a comment today in his press conference. Of course, obviously we're recording this, but actually agree with completely that West Virginia is in a better spot today than they were last year. And I agree with that. I think you can use this past season not as a negative, as in West Virginia is a bad place to be. Mm-hmm. It's a stepping stone job. But I think you can look at it and say, hey, you're able to win here. Our track record at West Virginia University is you can win here. And so on to the future we go.
Yeah. I wonder if you can get a dad for tampering with his own kid.
Well, don't tell Patrick Morrisey.
That, you know what, we got to talk about that too later. Hold on, we'll get to that.
Don't tell the governor.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Anyway, yeah, man, this whole thing happened so fast. I mean, I'm sitting here. I was working from home in my home office on Tuesday. We're recording this on Wednesday, which is the day that I went down, right? And that morning, the Iowa rumors. I wake up and it's like, okay, the Iowa rumors are starting to go away. He's not going to Iowa, and you see West Virginia fans like, oh, great, where he's staying. All right, this is awesome. A couple hours later, it's like Darian DeVries, #1 target for Indiana job, and I'm like, huh? Or a target. It didn't say #1; it said a target.
Yeah.
And within a couple, 3-4 hours, they had put out an announcement, man. It was like,
yeah.
And usually that's something that takes, 24, 48 hours. Well, once you start seeing the stuff come out from the media, you're looking at a day and a half before you actually see an announcement from a school. By gosh, Indiana, they did not wait, man. They were putting something out almost, and I'm like, I wasn't even able to do with my live show immediately because I was so late seeing the news.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, it's already, I wasn't expecting it to happen that quick. And I just couldn't believe how fast. I mean, that tells you one thing. And they had, the process had been going on for days. Had to have been, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and I'm not going to accuse, I don't know the timeline as far as he and his conversations, but it does make you, it's hard not to be skeptical about when this all started. Did it coincide with the team's struggles down the stretch in a few games? Did it have anything to do with the Colorado game? It's hard not to wonder those things, Jonathan, as a West Virginia fan and somebody who follows the team closely, there were some things that you look back on it now. It's like, man, that was a little bit, may have been a little bit uncharacteristic. But again, I don't think he threw any games or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but was he distracted at all?
Yeah. And we don't know the exact timeline, but today at his press conference in Indiana, he gave us a little bit of information because he made comments about how Indiana was accommodating to him being a candidate, being interested in the job. I don't know if there was an interview, but he spoke about how Indiana allowed him to focus on his job at West Virginia. So did he interview there? I'm sure he did. But when did that take place?
Yeah.
When did the first conversation take place? he talked about allowing himself to focus on West Virginia. Well, what day was it you got beat? Tuesday to Colorado. So were you so you went Wednesday through Sunday, selection Sunday, with nothing. So how focused on West Virginia would you have been at that? So if you back up, it makes a lot of sense that timeline would have pushed into actual game time and games being played. And so we'll probably never know. Um, but obviously, there were conversations, there were interviews, there were meetings. I will say that I watched portions of the Three Guys podcast today. I'll give them credit for this. They had made mention that Indiana also interviewed Ben McCollum and possibly twice. So they were extremely active under the radar. Um, and so we don't know the timeline, but we do know based on his comments today that there was a crossover
Mhm.
from his time, we believe, coaching at West Virginia. I'd also add to my initial timeline of events, and speaking, about Tuesday, just kind of catching everybody off guard. I posted it on Twitter on my account. Ren Baker Monday night went on Sportsline
Yeah.
and gave a direct conversation and thoughts about the situation and felt seemingly pretty good. And I think a lot of people listened to that Monday night and went to bed Monday night feeling like that's a man who feels pretty good about keeping his basketball coach. Um, and then you dodge the bullet on Iowa to the following morning, and then like you said, bam, you're hit with Indiana. And by all accounts, listening to Ren Baker, there wasn't much of an opportunity to match what Indiana
Mm-mm.
did. It was, hey, I appreciate it. I'm leaving. See you.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but as Ren said in his press conference today, he can lay his head down and sleep comfortable knowing that they put their best effort to keep him. Just didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I trust Ren. He's so far, he's hit, we think he's hit home runs in most of the hires he's made. I mean, the football one, I guess, is TBD. But there's definitely a lot of excitement around the program, which is, that's a positive. The women's basketball worked out. I mean, DeVries, you could say, I mean, it worked out, right? I don't think Ren had any idea he was going to leave after a year. Most the Sabins thing in baseball is working out awesome. So his hires have worked out so far. So I trust him to make the right call. And we were talking about him having to go through all these searches. I thought it was comical today, and I guess you got to give him kudos for saying this, being honest. But one of the reporters asked him, "Does this weigh on you having to do this so much?" And he was like, "Well, I don't get paid. There's no job I can go to and get paid this kind of money." So I was like, "Well, at least he's honest."
Yep.
And then he joked about having three women living at home that like to shop or something. So I thought that was comical, but no, but you do have to wonder. He's still human, right? And this is not what you sign up for. But I'll be honest with you. After watching Ren Baker for the last 2.5 years, it almost seems like these are the type of moments he lives for. Almost. Does that make sense? Like he's
Yeah.
a type of person that gets energized by these types of big challenges. And they even asked him today about how he stays so. He said he's actually more calm in moments like this than he is when everybody else is calm. And I thought that was an interesting, like a very good self-reflection or is it introspection? Is that the right word? Being introspective and knowing himself.
Yeah.
I've got my point to all that is this. I have a lot of faith in him. He's going to do the right thing here.
Yeah.
Make the right hire. He just went through this a year ago, so he still has his Rolodex from last year at his disposal. A few names added to it. So it shouldn't take that long, to be honest, to hire a coach this time around.
Yeah, and a couple things on that. Number one is and I'm not saying that Ren Baker feels this way. If I were to, sorry, Mountaineer Nation, I'm not. If I were your athletic director and I was going through what he's going through, I would imagine, would it not be difficult to sit back and say this is a reflection on me. You know, I hired a coach. I said this was the guy. He left. Maybe I couldn't keep him. Is this my fault? Is the perception that you can't work with me? I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense, but I feel like part of that position could be, oh crap, maybe I didn't do a good enough job. Maybe I'm not the guy. Maybe I can't get it right. I can't miss this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot of pressure on him. He also talked about in his press conference today that, and I wish I had the exact quote, but essentially he gave us a timeline, and it was fairly quick. It was essentially in the days ahead, the coming days. And apologies, I don't have the wording, but it led you to believe this was going to be wrapped up in the next potentially 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by Monday, it seemed possible. So I'm sure that's something we'll discuss here. Whose options,
Mm-hmm.
whose candidates, who's realistic, maybe who's not. But his timeline today in his press conference seemed that he's got an idea of where he wants to go, and he's going to act pretty quickly. And some of these candidates are currently coaching in the NCAA tournament, and that timeline could be extended
right,
based on their success in the coming days and the coming weeks.
Yeah. So keep West Virginia fans keep an eye out for the Drake game, which I don't know when these games are. To be honest with you, I was so frustrated over them getting excluded. Yeah. I haven't even paid attention to who's playing and when.
And we've not had a lot of time.
I have completely, no time, but I've completely, I don't want to say boycotted, but I've lost interest in the NCAA tournament, at least in the short term. But keep an eye on when Drake plays.
Mm-hmm.
Ben McCollum, obviously, keep an eye on when Utah State plays. Jerrod Calhoun. Who else is out there? Jonathan, Chris Mack, I think is one name I saw on one of the lists. I can't even remember who he's coaching, where he's at now. But
yeah, he's at the College of Charleston.
Are they in the tournament?
I'm along the lines of you. To be honest, we've been so covered up the last 3 or 4 days with frustration and stuff. I believe they were 20-something-9, but yeah, I mean, and he's in a new position there. Right. You know, Chris, it was a guy. So, you know, I think, and I'll say there are other places out there that cover this completely more in depth than you and I do in terms of the search.
Yeah.
So take our information. I'd recommend you go check out some of those guys. Jerrod Calhoun's the guy that you hear a lot. Fairmont State, there's ties to West Virginia. Won there at the lower level. Went to Youngstown State, was successful there at a program that just really never was overly competitive. At that level, it's hard to really invest in the NIL. There was some thought last year that he could have been the guy, but there was some worry jumping from one level all the way up in a relatively shorter period of time than, say, a DeVries. But has went to Utah State, and now they've got them in the tournament, and I believe – got them in the tournament as an at-large. Didn't even win the conference tournament. So that speaks volumes to him. McCollum, I'm a little bit – look, I think Ben McCollum would be a home run hire. I think you get a little bit nervous. If what West Virginia didn't just go through with DeVries, I think he makes a ton of sense. The worry is, and there's no guarantees in this, Couz, but – if you hire Ben McCollum and he comes to – you really want Ben McCollum?
I don't. What the heck? I don't know. That's just random. I don't know where those balloons came from.
Did we just hire Ben McCollum?
I don't know. If we – wouldn't that be something? For those of you listening on podcasts, we're sitting here and I'm on an Apple Mac, which can do sometimes these funny I don't know. It'll do balloons and fireworks and all kinds of stuff. I'm sitting in my chair listening to Jonathan with my hand on my face, just chilling, and balloons pop up as he's talking about Ben McCollum. Now I got to check Twitter.
I'm telling you, if West Virginia just hired Ben McCollum, we've struck gold all the way around. But to the point is, you do have to be nervous. What if he comes in and wins 30 games at West Virginia next year, and then an SEC school calls somebody like an Indiana? So I think there's some nervousness there around him that maybe you wouldn't get with others. And then associate head coach this past season, Chester Frazier, somebody that you have to talk about. An absolute elite recruiter. There's some belief there that some of the guys that are currently on the roster that can come back to West Virginia, a recruit that is waiting to see what happens here. Maybe he's the glue that can keep it together. The concern there, because listen, there's questions about all of them. That head coaching experience. And so those three seem to be, and I'll say that, and then it'll be somebody we're not really discussing. Yeah. But on the surface, those three seem to be people that you'd keep an eye on. And outside of Frazier, McCollum and Calhoun coaching in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the? I like the thought of Calhoun because right now, even though I know Wren in his press conference said that, it doesn't need to be somebody tied to the state because you just want a good basketball coach, and even that doesn't guarantee they leave. But it does play a factor. He did say it does play a factor, but it's not the main factor. With Calhoun, you got somebody who's probably less likely to leave.
Yep.
Unless the Cincy job might open up because he did go there. But which could happen. I actually did a video about it today and mentioned that the Cincinnati job could open up in a year or two. With Wes Miller, their fans are not real happy with him right now. So what happens there? But he was only at Cincinnati a year, so maybe that's not as big a worry.
Yeah.
But point being, I like the fact that he does have some ties to West Virginia. He spent 5 years on a staff with Hugs. He would know the culture. Obviously, he coached at Fairmont State, which is just right down the road.
Yeah.
So I like, but do you think, and again, I'm asking you to put yourself in Wren Baker's shoes, okay? Not as a fan, but do you think the fact that he is tied to Huggins could actually be perceived as a negative in this situation?
I don't think so. It wouldn't deter me. Just being an assistant there, obviously it potentially opens that box of Huggins been more comfortable maybe to come back,
right?
Spend a little bit of time there, and understandably so, right? And so, is that a road that you want to go down? How comfortable are you there? If it's and I would defer to Wren there because he's been in the box and in the battle with that situation more than us on the outside. If Wren's comfort level is okay there, and heck, I don't know, is that a question you asked Jerrod? Could you see yourself having some people come back into the program? How involved would you want them to be around? Obviously, Jerrod Calhoun is knowledgeable about the situation that happened. But if I felt like Jerrod Calhoun could lead my program, I don't think it would deter me because Bob Huggins may show up to a home game.
But he could show up at practice
or a practice,
and maybe he could show up probably maybe whenever he wants to. I don't know. Maybe and it maybe Wren doesn't care about that. Maybe I don't know. That's one thing. I'm intrigued. I will be intrigued by that if Calhoun gets the job. I'll be intrigued to see how that plays out. But I mean, Calhoun's a grown man. He hasn't been with Huggins since 2012. He's had 3 jobs now. I'm sure he's his own man. So, I'm like you. I don't think it'd be a concern of mine if I think he's the right guy. And I actually think having that connection to West Virginia is a little bit of a extra check mark by his name because with what you just went through.
Yeah.
I think that's something you may want to be a little bit more cautious of.
Look, there's unfortunately no guarantees when you hire a coach. There's no guarantees that they're going to win. There's no guarantees that they're going to stay. Obviously, we're doing a show because of that.
Yeah.
But there is some precaution you can take, right? And I just talked about it. Ben McCollum is somebody that I believe can have major success at West Virginia. But what happens if and I know West Virginia fans don't want to hear this, what happens if a better program comes along and says, okay, year one, you won 25 games. Year two, you won 27 games. Well, in 2 years, you're doing this again.
Mm-hmm.
One coach that's not going to be coming to West Virginia is Will Wade. There's reports that
Yeah.
he's going to North Carolina State. I would probably put Will Wade in that Ben McCollum category.
He was my number one. He was my number one choice for me
And
personally.
would absolutely win basketball games in Morgantown. But the concern there would be what happens when another big time program comes calling if he does that. And so while there's no guarantees, I think with the Jerrod Calhoun, you feel a little bit more secure and comfortable that if there is some success there, and you hope that there is, that in year one or year two or even 3 or 4, it's not, I'm just going to X program. And so could be completely wrong. I just feel like he gives you a comfort feeling that maybe he's going to stick around, because you do want to be careful. There's no guarantees, but man, you need to be really comfortable with the boxes you check in terms of longevity if there is success, because you can get by with this once. You don't want to go down this road again in another 11 months.
Yeah. Agreed. You mentioned I was trying to think of there was another coach I was going to ask you about, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. The High Point, Huss. I think his name's Alan Huss from High Point. I've seen his name pop up too. What are your thoughts on him? I didn't know a whole lot about him until I saw his name on. Actually, matter of fact, over on WVSportsChat.com, over at my site, someone wrote about him, and that was the first I'd heard of him. To be honest, I don't follow High Point basketball, right? And that's where he's at. But he's done a really good job there. He's actually from the same coaching tree as Darian DeVries. He was at Creighton.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting. Do you go down that road again?
Yeah, and I think that you can go down that road, whether it's High Point, whether it's a coach at Samford who's been mentioned, whether it's College of Charleston, and I'd even put Drake in that, McCollum at Drake. And we've had these discussions before. Heck, we had them last year. The concern there would be how long of a track record is proven, right? I mean, even though Darian DeVries was from Drake, which was a mid-major school, the longevity of success there was pretty extensive. And so when you get into these coaches from High Points or some other smaller schools, how long? What's your track record? Did you strike gold a year or two, or can you see sustained success over the years? And then the question becomes, and I'd probably throw this back to you. The question there becomes, would you rather roll? And I'm saying the term roll the dice. These are qualified coaches, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what's your comfort level? What direction would you go versus somebody at a High Point who hasn't had lengthy success, or somebody like Chester Frazier who may not have had any, but he's been in the co-pilot seat for a pretty good while.
About 12 years.
Right. Yeah. So are you more comfortable with a coach from a High Point because he has actually sat in the captain's chair? Or would you lean more towards a Chester Frazier, even though he lacks the head coaching experience? He checks off a lot of other boxes.
Yeah.
So where do you go there?
Yeah. Me personally, I would rather, if it was between those two, I'm going with Chester Frazier personally.
Yeah.
Just because of his recruiting prowess. He's proven he can bring in top-notch players, especially from the portal. He's great at building relationships with recruits and players, and he's from that, I'm going to say it right this time, the DMV, the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. For some reason, I always will say Delaware, and I don't know why I do that. It's a habit. I used to call it that until someone corrected me, and even though I know it's not that anymore, out of habit, I still say it. Anyway, that D.C., Maryland, Virginia corridor there. And there's a ton of talent in that area, man. Ton of talent, and he could go get it. And he's now been, he's only been at West Virginia a year, so he understands now a little bit about the culture. He understands a little bit about what it takes to win there. From he saw Coach DeVries do it. He's learned. And you look at some of the coaches he's coached under: Brad Underwood, Bruce Weber, Mike. Is it Mike Young, Virginia Tech?
Yep.
So I mean, he's coached under 3 pretty good coaches. I mean, guys who have extensive. 2 who went deep and made deep runs into March, right? Bruce Weber's played in the national championship games.
Players love him.
Yeah. So, to me, if it came down to Chester Frazier or somebody like a Huss, I'm choosing Frazier. But I just knowing Ren Baker's MO and what he looks for, I think he's going to look for somebody like a McCollum, somebody, even though Will Wade's off the board, somebody like a Will Wade, somebody who has multiple years of head coaching experience. Even if it's at a lower level, some of it, I think he wants somebody that's been in the driver's seat of a program.
Yeah, and Couz, I guess you can say, unfortunately, we don't have to look too far back to get a template for what Ren Baker's looking for. And if we're to go off of that template, which was Darian DeVries and his track record, and the years of success that he's had, how long he's been at stop A and B. If we just go off the template alone, Chester Frazier doesn't fit. He just doesn't fit. Somebody like a Ben McCollum or a Jerrod Calhoun kind of fit that template of what he's looking for. So if we go back off of what we just went through just less than a year ago, some of these guys, I feel like you can check the name off the list a little bit. Chris Mack is one that is interesting to me. Had some success at Louisville, got out of coaching, immediately went back to College of Charleston. He's got a history, was at Xavier and had a lot of success.
Final Four run, if I'm not mistaken, at Xavier.
And was, I said, successful at Louisville, but I think it was extremely early, and then it went downhill. There's been some noted situations there.
Right.
But then got out of controversy, but got out of coaching, and then jumped right back into College of Charleston, and I think it was 22, 24, and 9 this year. So speaks volumes about him. But again, being very careful here, does some of that situation at Louisville, is that a situation where Ren Baker just wants to stay away from it? I don't know. We really don't have – we've got a template on what he's looking for, but we don't really know some of that stuff. And so just a couple names that kind of fit the mold of what they're looking for. And it just seems like he's going to want somebody that's a little bit more seasoned to come in.
Yeah, well, if Chester Frazier would happen to get the job, what it's going to take is, Ren said today in his press conference, he is willing to talk to anyone who's on the staff. He did say that today.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're on his candidate list, but he's willing to talk to them. If they maybe you blow him away in the interview that he has no choice but to give you a second look. That can happen. I remember when Dana Holgorsen left West Virginia, Tony Gibson, they basically gave Tony Gibson an interview out of respect for him, and they said that he actually made them kind of consider him for the job. He did so good in the interview.
Yeah.
They ended up obviously going with Neil Brown, but they said Tony Gibson interviewed really, 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 really well and impressed Shane Lyons at the time, impressed him in the interview. And because of that, they felt like Tony Gibson would, get a head coaching job pretty soon, which now he's at Marshall, obviously. And I know that's football, but my point to that is, if you've got a plan, I mean, Chester Frazier's probably been prepared to be a head coach for the last several years of his career. He may already have a staff in mind. He may already have a plan in mind as to how he wants to run a program. All of that. If he can sit down and show that to Ren and get the support behind him that he needs from an NIL perspective and all that, that's what it would take. But I still, at the end of the day, think Ren's going to go with somebody who's been in the captain seat, as you said.
It's worth noting, and I think you and I agree, or will agree on this. You have to be careful because you don't want to hire based off of players' feelings and players' thoughts. But he does have the support of the players. It's interesting to note that several of the players who are eligible to come back have connections to Chester Frazier. They have not immediately announced their intentions to get into the transfer portal,
Mm-hmm.
and they are seemingly waiting on um, somebody to be hired and what happens. And
Yep.
so I think he is somebody that can kind of hold this together a little bit, or you are staring down the barrel of another complete remodel. But again, we said this earlier. I think as we record this on a Wednesday and NCAA tournament games start Thursday and Friday, if this gets drug out a little bit, look to see who's winning.
Yep. That's a good point.
Um, if a Utah State is winning and Drake loses, as an example, and nobody's been hired as a coach, maybe it kind of tells you who they're waiting on, or if it's vice versa. So games start literally tomorrow, so you can watch this and then you can watch the games and pay close attention to who's winning and who's losing, and that might just give you the timeline for the next head basketball coach.
Another name just popped into my mind. I want to get your opinion on Niko Medved from Colorado State.
Yeah, I'd like him. To be honest, he fits that track that track record, that mold that we talked about, that template Ren Baker uses. I haven't seen anything concrete, but there is some thoughts that the Minnesota job.
Yeah.
I believe he's from Minnesota.
He played ball there, yeah.
Okay, and so a lot of what I've seen connects there. Now, here's the flip side. This is not Homer, if you want to use it. West Virginia's a better job than Minnesota.
It is.
That's not up for debate. So West Virginia
And his wife's from Morgantown. I didn't know that until a couple of days ago.
Yeah, remember that? I think from last year that was kind of discussed a little bit. West Virginia is a better program, it's a better job, and so I don't know this, but I would imagine maybe West Virginia's NIL resources are probably going to be a little bit better than Minnesota's as well in basketball. I don't know that. It's just an assumption on my part.
Probably a pretty safe assumption. You know what I found out? This is totally off topic. I found out a lot of Minnesota's NIL goes to hockey.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
They love their hockey.
Yeah,
in Minnesota.
It's huge. So, that's a name that I'm interested in. Admittingly, because of where he's been, you don't follow him as much. But when you start to look at that track record, he's won basketball games, and so I would kind of maybe lean more towards if it's a West Virginia, Minnesota, and West Virginia wanted him. I think that's somewhere he probably would pick. Again, just an assumption on my part. So yeah, another really good name that fits that mold and that template of what Ren Baker's looking for.
Yeah. And with McCollum, it'll be interesting too. We've heard that Iowa's really hard after him.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if we don't hear anything about him. If Drake loses and a day or two goes by and you don't hear anything about him being hired at Iowa, then I think West Virginia's more in play because of having a connection with an athletic director to me is big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mark Kellogg, that was one of the reasons he and Ren Baker had a history together. That matters.
Yeah.
It matters if you know who your boss is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think, look, would I be happy if Ben McCollum was the next basketball coach at West Virginia? Absolutely. Would I be – but I'd be lying to you if I didn't in the back of my mind think to myself, if he wins and he wins big and he does it quickly, are we on repeat? Again, my only concern. Now, that's a good problem to have, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But admittingly, that would be a concern of mine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I mentioned this on a show before. What if the Notre Dame job opens up? And it's in Indiana. It's in the Midwest. That's the reason I used that job. I know Iowa and Indiana are different states because McCollum's from Iowa, by the way. If he don't get the Iowa job's going to be filled this year by somebody. If he don't fill
Yeah.
it, somebody else is going to. What if the Notre Dame job opens up, or what if Otzelberger? He's been a hot commodity. What if he decides to leave and go to the NBA or to a big P2 job somewhere, and then you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But again, you can't.
Right.
If you use that, like Ren kind of touched on this today. If you use that mindset, you're not going to hire anybody because everybody's a flight risk, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I completely agree, and maybe it's because this goes back to what you said earlier about one thing that's pretty fascinating about Ren Baker is that in these times he's at his calmest. I feel like I'm maybe the opposite, maybe because the wound is still so fresh and it's so new that there's some skepticism there, and it clouds you in thinking this guy's going to have a lot of success at West Virginia.
Yeah.
But man, we can't do this. We can't risk it. And that's not the right call, And so, yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. Ren's 100% right. You can't, if you think that a coach X, Y, or Z can have success at West Virginia, you do not hire him because you're afraid he's going to have success and somebody's going to take him. You absolutely make the call. I'm just stating that would be my concern with a Ben McCollum over somebody like a Jerrod Calhoun.
I agree, and I agree with that too. And if it came down to those two, personally, my preference, and I'll be good with either one of them. I think they're both great basketball coaches, and I'm going to support whoever he hires anyway. But I would probably lean Calhoun in that case because of that. And I think now if you'd have asked me that a week ago, I probably would have said differently, Jonathan.
100%. Because it's so fresh.
Yeah.
Right. And it's probably why we're thankful that Ren's making the calls and not us. But
I don't know. I'll take that $1 million paycheck.
Well, yeah, there's some bonuses in there I'd like to have too. But the point remains is that because this literally just happened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's so fresh that you can't help but to have it in the back of your mind. And look, we could be completely wrong. Jerrod Calhoun could be a guy or any of these coaches that we don't believe would be a one and done, and it could happen. I don't think 11 months ago we sat here and had a conversation about Darian DeVries thinking, man, if he wins, he turns this program around, he's gone next year. We never saw it coming. Yeah. And so I'm interested to see where this goes. But I would be lying to you if because it's so fresh and the wound is still there, and quite frankly, a lot of people feel betrayed, that in the back of your mind, you're not thinking to yourself, I'm scared to death if coach whatever has success next season because what's going to happen. And so that is in the back of your mind, but I think you just have to hire the best available. If it's Jerrod Calhoun, if it's Ben McCollum, if they think it is Chester Frazier or anybody else, I think you make that hire and you let the cards fall as they may, and you go from there.
Agreed. All right, we're going to switch gears a minute, and we're going to talk about the governor of West Virginia doing an investigation on the NCAA Selection Committee for West Virginia's snub. You and I haven't had a chance to talk about that yet.
We have not.
So what are your thoughts on it?
So I might surprise you. And this may not be a popular take. I loved it.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why. First off, I think you have to be honest with yourself. West Virginia is not going to play in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
It's not getting anything overturned. It's not all of a sudden going to get West Virginia. It's not going to get them in the tournament. They're not going to make Carolina stop playing. The perceived or the talked about bonus that the North Carolina athletic director supposedly received, West Virginia's not going to get it. I think you have to be honest with yourself. Gosh darn it, sue me, Morrisey. I like it. Look, I'm glad that somebody is taking up for the program. I'm glad somebody's taken up for the players on the team, and I'm glad that somebody stepped up and said, "You know what? When I see BS, I'm going to call it out." And I can appreciate it. Now, listen, I get it. You could make the argument that the governor of West Virginia needs to focus on other things. We've got a lot of problems. I get it. But I believe in two things. Number one, you can accomplish more than one thing at one time. And number
Yep.
two, listen, this was never going to be a rabbit trail that he was going to go chasing. This was to stand up, voice your displeasure about it, and then move on. And so I think at its surface, I liked it because, well, I think Governor Morrisey showed a little bit more fire and a little bit more passion and a little bit more energy and stood up a little bit more for the players than Darian DeVries did. So
I
what's that
like it.
tell you? I mean,
I'm
in a
that's a
perfect
I'm
world,
turning that into a clip, by the
in
way.
a perfect world, Darren DeVries would have stood in front of a podium and said, "This is not right," and he would have outlined it, but he didn't do it. He snuck off to Bloomington, Indiana. And so, you know what? Pardon me for being a little bit excited that Morrisey had a little bit more about him than Darren DeVries
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. I like that take, man. It's different. I'm a little bit of, I'm on that side, but I also see it as a dog and pony show to a degree. But here's what I do like about it, Jonathan. Patrick Morrisey, I think what he did in that moment, he showed he has West Virginia's back as a
100%.
university. When they now, and I think if nothing else, this solidified. If West Virginia needs something from the governor, from the legislature, whatever, to help them in athletics, whether it be funding, whether it be whatever, grant money, whatever, he's probably going to have their back and try to help them out as much as he can. That's what that showed me. We haven't had a governor do that in the past 8 years
Yep.
to that degree. The other governor, without getting too political, wore a lot of green. Rightfully so. He graduated from Marshall. So now I'm not saying he never did anything good for West Virginia, because he did. But at the end of the day, he bled green. You know what I mean? Because that was his alma mater. Patrick Morrisey, you can tell he loves West Virginia Mountaineer sports.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool. And J.B. McCuskey, the attorney general, now I thought it was probably a little bit beneath his position to use the word "we" so much. Because he sounded like a
Yeah.
fan. He sounded like me. But he went to school there. It's his alma mater. So
Yeah.
he's passionate about it, right?
Sure.
And I like that. It showed me that they're real people, man, and they care
Yeah.
about the same stuff I care about, even though it might not be the most important thing on their agenda. By gosh, they're going to stand up for WVU, and I think that's important in today's day and age of athletics, when money matters, when all of these other colleges, you read all these articles about all these other schools getting help from their state governments and all these other things. To know that we have a governor now, whether you agree with his politics and everything else or not, to know that you got a governor that's going to support West University and their athletic department, to me,
Yep.
is big.
Yeah.
And I think that was my number one takeaway out of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Outside the other stuff, outside the political grandstanding, there was a little bit of that going on there.
Sure.
Outside of the, you know, National Corrupt Athletic Association sign and all this other stuff, it showed me that he
Yeah.
has their back, and that's what we need right now.
Yeah. I liked it. Again, I think you have to get it at face value. And I think you have to realize that there's going to be some political grandstanding. That's what politicians do. I guess I've just come to accept it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also kind of knew on the surface that they weren't going to bring anybody from the NCAA in the courtroom. And I also knew that West Virginia wasn't going to magically appear in Dayton last night to play in the first 4 games. I knew that. And so when you can accept those things, then I think you can get to the next stage and say, you know what, gosh darn it, I'm glad that somebody stood up for those players. And if I'm a player on West Virginia's basketball team, you know what? I got a lot of appreciation for that because I didn't see a lot of other people doing it.
Yeah.
And so, again, not harping on it, but if there's some speculation is true out there that the players really weren't informed about Darian DeVries' departure, you weren't going to get it from him. And so you're 100% right. It was somebody to me that said, you know what, I've got your back. I don't know if it's going to get us anywhere, but I'm at least going to call it out and let them know I don't like it. I've got your back. So I didn't have a problem with it.
Yep.
I didn't have a problem with it.
The only, it did. We got a lot of people around the country were making fun of us as a state.
We're used to that.
But I mean, they're going to do that anyway, right?
Yeah. So. We're used to that. And it further goes to my thought on it is, I'm glad he did it because he did it knowing that he was going to get some backlash.
He even got an appearance on Barstool Sports out of it, man.
Yeah, they loved it. They
some of them were making fun of it, but I didn't know this. Did you know there are two West Virginia people from West Virginia on it? I had no idea. I don't watch Barstool very often. It's not really my cup of tea, but I thought it's pretty cool that there's a couple West Virginia. But you got the McAfee show representing West Virginia. You got two people on Barstool now representing West Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're everywhere, man. We're everywhere.
So like I said, I took it for face value that it wasn't going to just magically change things. But I think his intentions were good. And if nothing else, I was glad to see somebody stand up for the program that felt like they were screwed.
And I'll tell you something else, a bigger picture level. Well, it could potentially create change because he drew attention to it and it made national news. Maybe it causes a conversation to be had about the selection process, and maybe it changes in the future because of it.
And it should also be noted for those that thought this was silly and for those that thought it was a stunt, this is not the first time that Patrick Morrisey has went to bat for West Virginia University against the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, last year didn't go the way West Virginia wanted to go, but West Virginia's Raekwon Battle and some other players all around the country can thank Patrick Morrisey, Governor Morrisey, for them being able to play last year and going forward because he's the one that spearheaded that. So I think there was some grandstanding there. It's just what politicians do. But I also think that Governor Morrisey, then Attorney General Morrisey, has a track record of standing up for West Virginia University athletes.
Yep. Amen. All right. One more quick thing and we'll get out of here. What were your thoughts on West Virginia choosing not to play? Now, it's my understanding this was a player's decision. But because at first I was skeptical about this, I'm thinking, but them not playing in the postseason, them opting out of the NIT and the Crown tournament. I first was like, wait a minute now. If this was Darian DeVries' decision, he knew he was leaving. But from what I'm hearing, that's not the case. The players decided not that they want to play. They wanted the NCAA tournament is what they felt they deserved, and once they got snubbed, they were just done. Is what I heard. Which I totally understand that. To be honest with you, I kind of don't blame them. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with it. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into making it to the NCAA tournament. You take somebody like a Javon Small who unfortunately never got to experience it.
Yeah.
I feel like the last thing you want to do is to play the NIT or go to Vegas in some kind of Crown tournament. I do wonder, and I do know that it's the player's decision, but I also think the players could probably read the tea leaves.
That's true.
And there was some question marks at best about what the coaching staff was going to look like, what the roster. You did make the tournaments, and then there's some spring. There was just a lot going on. I don't fault any of them, and I don't think anybody does.
Not at all.
And if you're going on, I think it's best that West Virginia just cut the season loose and especially now that we learned about DeVries' departure, start fresh and going because the Crown was going to be delayed.
Yeah,
a little bit. That was correct me if I'm wrong here, Couz, but they didn't start till like the very end of March, right? I mean, that was a
Yeah,
couple weeks away.
the transfer portal would have already opened before they even started the tournament, is my
And
understanding.
so, what does that look like? That delay seemed to be the final straw there. So, yeah, no issues with that whatsoever.
Yeah, me neither. Especially now, like I said, especially now that we know that we don't have a coach.
Yeah.
Um, it's been fun. Another fun week. No football talk this week. Football teams
Yeah.
on spring. Everybody's on spring break. No football going on this week.
Yeah.
Probably have some stuff to talk about. Rich Rod will probably say something funny in a press conference next week. We can come on here and talk about or something. But and maybe more basketball talk next week. We'll see. I'm sure
Yeah.
there'll be some coaching. There might even be a head coach by next week, Jonathan. Who knows?
At this point, the way the last 11 months has been, I've got no clue what we'll talk about next week, but there'll be something.
Yep, be something in the works. But we thank everybody for tuning into the show. Check us out on X. Jonathan, you can find Jonathan at Jonathan K. Martin. It's JONATHAN. K. Martin. You can find me at Couz206. You can find us both at GB Breakdown _ on X. This is obviously the Gold and Blue Breakdown Show here on Hoops from the Hills. We also appear on Couz's Corner when we talk football. Check us out over there. Please subscribe to both channels. Go to WVSportsChat.com, brand new website where you'll find articles on West Virginia football, basketball, and baseball, covering those all year round. And we appreciate all the support. We thank you for tuning in. By the way, if you're listening on podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and give us a follow. It really helps us out. And on YouTube, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope the rest of your day or night is top shelf. God bless you, and Q Country Roads.